Buckingham Palace, the home in 1935 of King George V and Queen Mary. It was Jubilee year, and British subjects throughout the empire were celebrating the 25-year reign of their beloved monarchs. At home in Sydney's Centennial Park, steady rain, mud and puddles failed to dampen the enthusiasm of a crowd of more than 30,000 who watched a Jubilee Day parade by all the armed services. The occasion marked one of the first public appearances of the new Governor of New South Wales, Sir Alexander Hoare Ribbon, a gallant soldier who'd won the Victoria Cross at the Sudan. Highlight of the parade was the salute of 21 guns to honor the King and Queen on the anniversary of their coronation. Among the drenched onlookers were young Japanese naval cadets, members of the crew of 2 cruisers on a goodwill visit. Cadets who would, within 6 years, be engaged in some of the greatest sea battles in history. The Japanese squadron commander was given a traditional naval welcome as he stepped ashore to inspect the Guard of Honor. Within a generation, Japan had risen from obscurity to become a major naval power. But the world's navies were all active as the first submarine ever to enter Fremantle Harbour arrives. The Dutch K-18 on the last leg of a 7-month, 21,000-mile devious trip to Batavia, now known as Jakarta. An Australian officer shed his sword before extending an official welcome to Lieutenant Commander Hettertjes and men of the Royal Netherlands Navy. In Melbourne, the Army showed signs of becoming mechanized. An armoured car was tested, a sort of Ned Kelly's suit on wheels. Yes, the armor was impervious to rifle bullets too, but I wonder if those tires were bulletproof. Lack of finance and economic stringencies held back production, and within a few years this model was soon out of date. At Victoria Barracks, Sydney, Army cadet officers rehearsed for their passing out parade, culmination of a tough schooling, both in the classroom and outdoors. 2 years later, the academy was moved to Canberra, there to become the Royal Military College, Duntroon. A place in this select band was obtained only after rigid physical and educational tests. In the laboratory, they studied chemical warfare and explosives.
Now, gentlemen, the portion of the clinitrophenol lyddite that you have prepared, I shall now explode.
Physical fitness was attained in the gymnasium. These were the days before mechanization of cavalry units, and skill in the saddle was another requirement, a subject no longer on the curriculum. This was no military camp, but the site for the World Jamboree at Frankston, Victoria, led by Chief Scout Lord Baden-Powell.
And here they are gathered together with wonderful pageants to show to one another, and all wanting to see each other and realize the magnitude of the brotherhood of scouts to which they belong.
Founder of the scouting movement in 1908, the chief, as he was known to more than 6 million boys of every race, color and creed throughout the world, was 78 years old. It was a stirring experience, not only for the hero of Mafeking, but also for the 10,700 scouts from 23 countries, as the old London-born leader took the salute. 2 years later, he retired to his winter home in Kenya, where he died in January 1941, at the age of 84. It was a great day in the lives of these scouts, but an even greater one for unknown artist Harry Hankey, winner of the Archibald Prize. Using a backyard garage for a studio, and forced by economic difficulties to prepare his own canvas and paints, he created this self-portrait in a painting time of 8 hours. The £500 prize was a bonanza in a year struggling out of financial depression. Across the continent at Kalgoorlie, the famous gold mines were still working round the clock, turning out more than 1 million ounces a year. And with gold prices rising in 1935, the production incentive was high. The But this gigantic project in the arid desert was completely dependent upon a pipeline 30 inches in diameter and 350 miles long from the Mundaring Weir near Perth, completed in 1903, through which 2,700 million gallons of precious water are pumped every year. A 2-week journey for every drop, which is lifted 1,000 feet, enabling the intricate processes from ore to ingot to produce about 77% of the total annual Australian gold output. Kalgoorlie, in the heart of Western Australia, the state which has mined more gold than any other since 1897. But in southeastern Queensland at Roma, the search for black gold was still going on. In fact, the outlook was no brighter than in 1900, when a water bore in the Great Artesian Basin first yielded a petroliferous gas. 37 years and millions of pounds worth of prospecting later, it was still mostly mud and petroleum gas. Although no oil was found in sufficient quantity to produce an Australian petrol, the motorcar industry was steadily expanding. In South Australia, the General Motors plant at Woodville was producing all steel bodies. Huge drop hammers and presses were seen in action for the first time in this country. The press was the largest in the Southern Hemisphere. This was the drawing plan for the 1935 model Chevrolet. Production rate rose to 30,000 bodies a year, and when war interrupted this production in 1939, more than 374,000 bodies had been turned out, not only for the local market, but also for export by ship. After 30 years' service in Australian waters, the one-time Tasman record-crossing holder, Mahino, of 5,233 tons, stripped of her 3 propellers, was being towed to Osaka, Japan. But on July 8th, 200 miles north of Brisbane, in a cyclone, Mahino was blown onto Fraser Island. Her skeleton crew of 8 Japanese waded ashore to camp on the island for 2 weeks before salvage plans were abandoned. Mahino was left to the waves. Another Union steamship vessel, the Marama, brought Queen Saloti of Tonga to Sydney. She was met at the wharf by her eldest son, Prince Taufa Aho, a 6-foot Newington College student and star athlete and heir of the Tongan throne. Queen Saloti was one of the principal guests at the Methodist centenary celebrations in Melbourne.
I want to thank everybody in Sydney for the welcome given me today. The Association of Tonga and Australia have always been friendly, and we send our greetings to you all.
After 3 years as Prime Minister, Joseph Aloysius Lyons with his wife left Sydney to attend the Imperial Conference in London. The popular hard-working leader of the United Australia Party was showing strains of his fight to restore Australia's overseas credit. But the couple quickly joined in the relaxing shipboard life. But Dame Enid, mother of 11, could not break away from her domestic routine, even when a hole turned up in the PM's sock. And as for her husband, it was almost a busman's holiday. And snakes alive, whether or not she liked it, Madam Python was back in circulation. And one of the zoo's curliest problems of 1935 was solved. In Melbourne Zoo, another large lady was the center of attraction, ever eager for something to tickle her palate. And if Baby Hippo didn't mind, the old girl provided a ton or so of fun for her jockey in a spot of track work, even if he too was a little overweight. While in New Zealand, we met Jock Banks, that year's man of courage. Here is what famous radio star and comedian Jack Lumsden had to say about him.
Car driving is a nightmare to some people with full use of their limbs, but this farmer's son from Matamata moves his bus away quite efficiently with only his feet to control it. Always looking on the bright side, he enjoys a cigarette, but prefers to look after himself in this respect. Long practice has made it an easy job to take a match out of the box, strike it, and even shelter it from the wind, as others do with their hands. It's a long way from foot to mouth on a windy day, but it's all in a day's smoke, and puffing his fag, his sunny disposition is evinced in this little tete-a-tete. Jock has got ping-pong down to a fine art, and with uncanny skill places the ball from one side to the other. He does his own caddying and nonchalantly brings the ball into play again. And he doesn't serve many faults either. His keen eye sees to that, and placing his shots keeps his opponent on the move all the time.
At La Perouse that year, Aborigines put on a boomerang throwing exhibition every weekend. But this display was for the benefit of a visiting Mexican sideshowman and his 2 attractive assistants. A gentle reminder that despite their primitive background, the Australian natives were masters of aerodynamics long before Leonardo da Vinci dreamed up his idea of a flying machine.
So that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm glad you like that. Well, tomahawk. Did you throw these too? Oh, no, sir. We only throw the boomerang. Well, I can throw these. Can you? Come over here and I'll show you how. Good. Come on, boys.
And Pedro showed his skill with his one-way weapons. A hatchet man at work. How's this for a 1935 William Tell? But it was no act on June 24th of that year. 12,000 fight fans packed Sydney Stadium to see our national middleweight champion, Fred Hennebery, match punches with highly rated American Tommy King. It was a boom year for boxing in Australia, with Ron Richards and Jack Carroll at their peak. As usual with Hennebery bouts, it was a non-stop affair. 15 exciting rounds. Tommy King staged a grandstand finish, and when popular referee Joe Wallace declared a draw, the fans were happy. Athletic meeting of the year was held in Melbourne, coinciding with the centenary celebrations. Sydney University student Jack Metcalf was one of the stars when he set a new Victorian record of 6 feet 5 3/4 in the high jump. Jack had won the hop, step and jump at the Empire Games in London in '34. And here you see him the following year creating a world record of 51 feet 9 3/4 inches. A leap which raised hopes of a gold medal at the Berlin Olympics in '36. But he finished third, the only Australian athletic medalist of those games. However, he later repeated his London victory in the triple leap. Jack Metcalf, a jump ahead of his rivals in 1935. For these contestants at the Melbourne show, the jumps ahead were watery hazards. Invariably a highlight of show ring events, this was no exception. No records or bones were broken, just a slight dampening of the spirits of the unstable jockeys. There was no more colourful aquatic carnival in Australia than the annual Henley on Yarra Regatta, Melbourne's version of the famous Thames event. A gay gathering of young and old. And those fashions. Yes, indeed. Striped blazers, cushions and gondoliers and all that jolly old stuff, you know. Canoodling without a thought for the girls. Until after the race, of course. But this year provided another gay setting on the high seas aboard the luxury liner Otranto, selected for a summer cruise, the first of its kind ever held in Australian waters. Dining, wining and dancing. Ah, this is the life. No chance of being bored at this festive board. And the theme song of the day, Cocktails for Two. But for the real sailors, there could be nothing better than this 250-ton topsail schooner, the Huia, built at Aratapu, New Zealand in 1894, and for 33 years carrying explosives around the Australian and New Zealand coast. Holder of the Tasman crossing record for a sailing ship, the Huia was later sold as an island trader, but was wrecked off the coast of Noumea in 1950 on her first trading voyage. Sharks. In 3 weeks of February and March 1935, 3 young men were taken by sharks from New South Wales beaches. One at Austin Mere, the second at North Narrabeen, and the third at Maroubra. The state government adopted a recommendation of a Shark Menace Advisory Committee, and regular systematic meshing was introduced. In the first 6 months, more than 1,100 sharks were caught. Hammerheads, many whalers and grey nurses. The cost averaged about £7,000 a year. At one stage, one chartered company was operating 4 boats with 12 nets, each 1,000 feet long. Aircraft and handliners joined in the hunt for the killers. Each catch by these intrepid fishermen at Bondi drew crowds eager for a close-up view. Many claimed meshing was a waste of public money. But when another man was attacked while fishing from his boat, the scare grew to near panic. William Johnson tells of his lucky escape.
The shark came out of the water when I bent down, and the shark grabbed me sleeve and tore it, as you see there. After bending down, I felt the tug. I looked around there. It was finished then, so we pulled up the killick and went in. Oh, well, we're going to battle now and go out and try and catch it. Cheerio.
Sharks, as much a menace today as in 1935. To these attacks, owners of Alsatians combined to stage demonstrations designed to prove the breed was intelligent and gentle, particularly to children. Yes, it was a tough time for Alsatians, but they won through by leaps and bounds. On March 6, 1935, New Zealanders hailed the arrival of the Dominion's first set of quads. Born in Dunedin Hospital to Mrs. George Johnson, 3 girls and a boy. First came Bruce, 4 pounds 10 ounces, then Vera, 3 pounds 15 ounces, Kathleen at 4 pounds 9 ounces, and Mary, who tipped the scales at 4 pounds 5 ounces. A hungry handful for the nursing staff, but after a bottle or two, they were oblivious to the widespread interest and obstetrical history they'd created in the Shaky Isles on this, their day of birth. Across the Pacific in Hollywood, star of films and radio, Will Rogers paid tribute to Shirley Temple on her 6th birthday.
Now, I'm not going to make a speech, because I'm so long-winded. I make speeches for everywhere for no reason whatever, and you are the biggest entertainer in the world today. And you have arrived at that position by not making speeches.
So a painting of Shirley is unveiled in the Fox Studio dining room in Hollywood. The celebrated star is 6, has a party, and makes a speech.
I want to thank you very much. I think it's very nice to have a big party like this.
Frosty ice cream and sugary cake make a happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Shirley. Happy birthday to you.
From a birthday to a wedding, Sydney's wedding of the year on September 16th. St. Mary's Cathedral was jam-packed and thousands crammed nearby Hyde Park to see Madge Elliott and Cyril Ritchard married. For 18 years, they had teamed in musical comedies before theatre fans in London, New York, and throughout Australia. The couple were to continue as a blissfully happy team, both on and off the stage, for another 20 years. Meanwhile, our small aircraft building industry was being launched. Well-known aircraft designer Wing Commander Wackett planned a high-winged monoplane with the idea of instituting a regular trans-Tasman airmail service. The plans called for 2 Napier engines, but only 1 plane was produced at the engineering works at Sydney's Cockatoo Dock, hence the name of the aircraft, the Kodock. A New Zealand airman was imported to carry out the test flights, and in and around Australia trip, the Kodock got only as far as Charleville in Queensland, and its brief career, along with Wackett's plans for the Trans-Tasman service, came to an end. Despite setbacks in aviation design and development, the aeroplane was proving its value in the field of survey. These are the first aerial films ever taken of Central Australia. Looking like waves on some inland ocean, Huge sand dunes stretch as far as the eye can see. On May 20th, Jimmy Broadbent landed at Mascot after a 7,140-mile round Australia flight in 3 days, 9 hours, 54 minutes, regaining the record from another famous flyer, Jim Melrose, who had taken 2 days and 2 hours longer.
Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Now that the record is over, exactly what was the object in tackling the record, Jim?
Well, the main reason, I think, was that I was the first one to hold it solo when I broke it, Kingsford Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt I'd rather like to get it back again.
And how was the trip, generally speaking, from a flying point of view?
Very, very good, Harold. There were no bumps to speak of practically the whole way.
Well, Jim, it must be very satisfying to you now that you've accomplished this feat and taken the record back again.
It was, Harold. I felt quite bucked up about it.
Good.
On their way to Richmond Aerodrome to prepare for a hop-off at dawn next day with the first double load of mail to cross the Tasman Sea, a 1,200-mile watery waste, to New Zealand. Smithy told of the plans.
The flight on this occasion is a little noteworthy on account of the fact that 2 machines for the first time in this part of the world will be doing an ocean flight in formation. There's the dear old Southern Cross that you all know so well, in command of yours truly, and the Faith in Australia, an equally well-known machine under the command of my old friend Captain Bill Taylor.
Each plane was loaded with 600 gallons of fuel, enough to run the engines continuously for 21 hours at about 100 miles an hour. The second stage of the drama began when one of the navigators became ill, and Smithy was forced to load all of the mail onto the Southern Cross. Bill Taylor was thus released to act as navigator to his old companion. The third phase occurred 400 miles out to sea, when a portion of the plane's exhaust carried away, shattering the starboard propeller and forcing Smithy to turn for home. Mail, cargo, and surplus petrol were dumped to lighten the load. A reenactment later demonstrated the courage of the crew that made possible their safe return. With the damaged propeller out of action, the port engine soon began to show signs of strain, and somehow more oil had to be got to it. These pictures show how Bill Taylor accomplished the feat. Climbing out on the tiny strut, he drained the oil from the damaged motor into a thermos flask, passing it back through the window to where it was emptied into a suitcase, before transfer to the overheated engine. Oil spilt in the operation splashed down the fuselage. For half an hour, this gamble with death continued, and each time the motor was slowed to allow oil to be added, the plane would plunge towards the sea, to rise again as the engine came back to life. Rescue ships had been rushed to the area, but the old bus limped home to Mascot for one of its greatest receptions. Smithy had made it again, but that dead engine was a reminder that the gallant crew had had a lucky escape. Australia acclaimed her aviation heroes. John Stanage, who maintained radio contact throughout the drama. Bill Taylor, whose efforts undoubtedly saved the day. And Smithy, then the world's greatest airman. But 1935 was not to be Smithy's year. Earlier, he'd taken delivery of a new plane, the Lady Southern Cross, with which it was hoped to regain, among others, the England-Australia record. Just over 6 months after the Tasman drama, he was to tempt fate for the last time. They were lost over the Bay of Bengal, closing the career of Australia's greatest aviator at the end of a fateful and eventful year. 1935, a year to remember.